Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Historical Humans Reacts. And on today's episode, lasers reveal the secrets of lost Silk Road cities in the mountains of Uzbekistan, which is a mouthful, but we've talked about this before with LiDAR, but this is yet another LiDAR study coming out showing that there's this medieval city built on this mountainside along the Silk Road, which was probably one of the biggest trade routes in the world for centuries, where it traveled from China all the way to Europe across the central Eurasian steppe.
Yeah, the Silk Road, you'd begin in China or India, depending on which particular goods you were trading in. You would then cross the entirety of the earth until you ended up in either what is now Turkey at Istanbul or Egypt with Alexandria, at which point your goods would be then shipped off into the rest of Europe, and that was where the road ended because you finally had to go over water.
It's crazy to think about because that is a journey of about 7,000 miles, 6,000. That could be
Yes.
an exaggeration,
Um,
but
you're crossing about a third of the Earth's circumference. It's pretty massive. And one of the fun things that this study here with the LiDAR shows with the mountain cities and with Uzbekistan in particular is that a lot of traditional maps attempting to lay out where exactly the Silk Road was and what towns it would have gone through avoid mountains and highlands like the plague. And this study here is kind of proof that that's not really true, that there were variations on the Silk Road because it's not one set path, but there were routes of it that went up into the mountains of Uzbekistan and traded with these people before coming back down and rejoining the main route at choke points and various other places that we know the roads coalesced in.
which I did look it up, it's about 4,000 miles. So quite the journey to do overland, usually on foot or on a beast of burden like a potentially a horse or even a camel. Like it's not a quick journey by any stretch of the means. It would take years to get from one point to the other. So this stuff was traded for a long, long distance, and like Colin mentioned, there were different variations. Some went down to Delhi, some went up to Beijing, some went down to Arabia and Persia, some went to Egypt or Constantinople. Either way, it had an end goal, and it was far. And this is one of the coolest things because one of the things that they were starting to do is look at these areas to uncover more that had been inhabited. And one of these cities was actually located during a hike where archaeologists were walking along a riverbed and spotted burials. And they realized that it was very anthropogenic, which showed that it was more man made, more human made than anything. And when they started walking over it and doing a pedestrian survey, there were thousands and thousands of pottery sherds there.
Yep. Yeah, this is why, if you own an archaeologist, please do not let them out of the house. They go hiking and find things, and then you never hear the end of it.
Those pesky free range archaeologists.
The outdoor ones.
And what ended up happening was they found the city that ended up encompassing about 30 acres in total, which was in what they call an inhospitable climate, about 7,000 feet up in above sea level, up in the mountains, which is massive. I mean, that is such a high area,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. For context, less than 3% of all human beings on Earth live at that elevation or higher. Less than 3% of all humans. That's how high up this is. This is some Hindu Kush level stuff going on here.
well, and my favorite part about it is they talked to the local forester, and he was just like, "Oh yeah, all those shirts you're finding, I find them all the time in my backyard." And then they go to his house and find that his house is buried on a same burial mound.
Yeah. Also known as, so can we dig a hole in your backyard? Sure, guys, why not?
And it's really interesting because then once they discovered the site, they started digging more into it, and that's when they started looking into lidar specifically, in which they discovered the second site, which is the point of this article, which is a 300-acre medieval city about 3 miles from the previous one, which
And
is just another aspect of the integrated hub and spoke system of the trade route.
yep,
You had these local communities that would help support the trade network. They would get trade goods, they would receive visitors, and they would house them, let them stay, and then they would continue on. Well, obviously, along that, you're going to have bigger settlements and even bigger settlements. This went from a town to an entire city. And the funny thing in my mind is they realized how big this site was, realized, oh man, this is massive. So they continued to investigate and realized that they had only uncovered about half of the total land area.
yeah. This is a major medieval city. This place would have existed from the 8th to 11th centuries. That would have been its area of primary occupation, have been its time period. And they really did do some very good work here with the lidar and with the mapping and the excavation, because they were able to do something that's very hard to do. They got down to inch level details on the maps, and that was a big part of when they realized, wait a minute, it keeps going, because they didn't have the ability to write anything off as that's just a poor picture. Nope, it just kept going and going and
Well, and
going.
the biggest issue with LiDAR, and this does happen a lot, and the article talks briefly about it, is that a lot of times you can have false positives where the LiDAR maps will indicate that something potentially is there, and then when you actually go to investigate it, lo and behold, it turns out that there's not actually anything present. So a lot of this stuff, they'll do markers and they'll mark it on a map to be ground truthed, in which they'll go out there with shovels, they'll go out there with the survey crew, and they'll make sure and see how this is actually a legitimate thing. And it's kind of interesting because one of the things that they found about this city is that one of the reasons why they think it exists is because it was an iron smelting city. And that they found that with a bunch of pottery and kilns, and they think that's potentially why this city was able to sustain itself is because they have rich iron ore and they have dense juniper forests, which they think was burned to help smelt the fuel or
And
fuel for the smelting.
yeah. So the mining and the smelting would have given the town good quality iron to exchange with merchants traveling along the Silk Road who might be selling, I don't know, spices, the silk itself that gets the namesake for, or any number of other goods, because the Silk Road is a series of exchanges going on. And good quality iron, that's also worth a lot in China and in Europe during this period. It's worth a lot everywhere.
And it's very interesting, and this is where archaeologists really earn their living, so to speak. One of the reasons why they're able to make certain inferences, like that this was a city that wasn't strictly a mining settlement, is because there's a cemetery which has burials of women and elderly and infants, showing that it was an actual city. It wasn't just like a work settlement. It wasn't just there for mineral extraction. No, these people lived their lives, they grew up, they were buried, they died in this area. Like,
Yeah, this is no Klondike Gold Rush town. This is something that actually has a sustained population, and a pretty massive one at that, given how far spread out the site is.
and I just want to point out that this is in what is traditionally and usually referred to as some of the most remote, isolated areas in the world. The Eurasian steppe is, you could go thousands and thousands of miles without really interacting with all that many people. So for there to be such a large population here and for it to be right along the pathway of the Silk Road, it's not unreasonable to assume that the two are pretty well related.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I
It's
think
just yeah, it's just like yeah, just it's changing our understanding of how far north the Silk Road was willing to go, and there's pretty compelling evidence for that just from this site alone. I think that's really all there is to say about it. But yeah,
besides the fact that this is the find of a lifetime, and the last line of the article surmises it pretty well. the researchers have a lifetime of work ahead of them because you will. This is going to be dozens of PhD projects, hundreds of master's thesis. Like, they're going to research the living hell out of this, and rightfully so.
Yeah, befriend these people. You will be set for life because you will never run out of things to do at this place.
And on that note, thank you guys for watching. Let us know what you think down below, and we'll see you in the next one.